everyone and welcome back to the FPL Family YouTube channel for another Premier League deep dive. So in this series we have been looking at each club in turn to think about their assets ahead of the 21-22 season. Now this time it's the one I've been waiting to do anyway, and we are in North London for Spurs. Now of course I will try and be as unbiased as possible over the course of this video, and we'll just be looking purely at the stats from last season and beyond to work out whether these Spurs assets are actually worth buying into or not. Now, as I am recording this video, Harry Kane is indeed still a Spurs player, and so for the purpose of this, we will treat him as if he is going to start for Spurs during the new season. But of course, the underlying stats and all of the kind of data behind him is still valid if he does move away from Spurs. Of course, there might just be some tweaks in terms of his positioning or in terms of his ability to return points depending upon the team he goes to and therefore his new teammates. But for the purpose of this, we will treat Harry Kane as a Spurs player because that is indeed what he is. Okay, so let's have a little look into the Spurs goals from last season then. So as you can see here, Spurs scored 68 goals last season. That was tied third for the most goals scored over the course of the season with Leicester and Liverpool. 56 of those goals came from inside the box. That was the fifth best in the league, and 12 of those from outside of the box. That was the third best total across the league. They had 44 big chances which they scored last season. Only Manchester City managed to score more big chances than Spurs did over the course of the 2021 season. There were also 5 penalty goals in the mix of those 68 goals. They had 443 attempts on goal. That was the 12th best in the league. So actually in terms of attempts, not great from a Spurs perspective, but obviously they did get the returns from those opportunities that they had. Of those 443 attempts, 271 of them came from inside the box, and they had 88 big chances, which was the 5th best across the division. They also hit the woodwork an impressive 18 times last season. Only Villa and West Ham managed to hit the woodwork more times than Spurs did last season, with both of those two clubs registering 19 hits on the woodwork. They had a shot conversion rate of 38.8%. Only United had better than that with 39.4%, and they were also top for goal conversion with 15.3, which was 1.3% better than the second place Leicester City. Now these heat maps, which we can see on the screen, show the 68 goals scored as well as the attempts on goal, and the green attempts are the ones that were on target. As always, the stats in this video are provided by our friends at Fantasy Football Scout and their members area. If you are not a member, there is a link in the description below which will get you 20% off. Now talking about those big chances for Spurs then, we can see, having a little look at this graphic, unsurprisingly, we see Kane at the top with 30, followed by Son with 23, and then Bale, who of course we don't believe is going to be a Spurs player next year. He is back in training with Real Madrid following the end of his loan to Spurs, and we aren't anticipating him coming back to Spurs for the new season, but he is in there because he was absolutely part of the big chances that they had last season. So what's really interesting for me then is that when we start to look a bit lower down that list, we see the likes of Dele Alli, who seems to be coming back into favour under the new manager Nuno Espirito Santo, and we will talk a little bit more about Dele Alli later on in this video because I think he might be a bit of a jammy pick going into this new season. And I know that we said this last time around under Mourinho, but things do feel a little bit different this time around. So in terms of those big chances taken, then we've got Kane up the top with 30, followed by Son, as I say, with 23. Those are very, very big numbers. And when we have a little think about why, what's really interesting is when we look at the number of passes, we can really see how Spurs played that counter-attacking football last time around. And so they weren't having lots and lots of passes, lots and lots of touches. So total passes last time around, 19,070, which was the 7th best in the league. So again, a little bit lower than maybe we would have expected from them given the type of goal scoring that they had last time around. 6,429 successful passes in the opponent's half. That was 7th best in the league. 5,640 final third touches, which was actually the 8th worst across the division last time around, and 723 penalty area touches, which was tied 7th worst across the league. So, as mentioned before, not necessarily getting all the touches in all the right places, but being really clinical with the ones that they are getting, which is enabling them to score, have one of the best goal scoring records across the division. When we have a little look in a bit more detail then at these assets, and we have a little look at the assists, We can see from corners taken, Son is looking like the most impressive asset to have at Spurs, taking 96 corners last season, 27 of those being successful, and his underlying stats also look good for other areas. So he was the third best midfielder for goals scored last season with 17. He was the fourth best midfielder for assists last season with 11. He also got 13 clean sheet points, which was second best. Only Salah, Mount, Jorginho and McGinn managed to do better than them. They had 14 to his 13. So again, hugely impressive stats from a defensive point of view in terms of those additional points that you pick up for a clean sheet. Not that Son does a lot in the way of defending, but that's the benefit of a midfielder, right? They get those additional points that you don't necessarily get when you're looking at some other midfield options. He also created 75 big chances. Only Bruno, Mount, Grealish and KDB created more than he did. 14 big chances created. Only Bruno, Grealish and KDB managed more than Son did. And in fact, when we have a little look at how often he was creating a chance, he was creating one every 42 minutes. So Son's underlying stats looks good. Of course, we should note that he was also top for XG overachievers last season, so we'll need to see whether he can continue that going into the new season, because he did have stats that were really, really great last time around, also fifth best for overall BPS. And when we take away the forwards in the game, he was actually second best in terms of those midfielders. So some really good stats for Son. And we can see that with the corners taken, because his route to goals is improved as a result of this. Obviously, we've got the goals scored, but also the assist potential is greater because he has corners in his locker. And obviously is, if you look at the underlying stats for who else is taking corners at Spurs, he is the primary corner taker. When we have a little look then at set piece threat, he is much, much lower down, potentially because he is a little bit smaller than a lot of these guys that you see above him. Obviously Kane the top for attempts from set pieces with 39, followed interestingly by Eric Dyer, and we'll talk a little bit about the defenders later on, with Toby Alderweireld, who looks very much like he's on his way out of Spurs, followed by Bale, who of course is no longer there. That's my two favourites gone in one go. And then Aurier and down to Son. So we can see some good defensive stats, or stats for the defenders there in terms of set piece threat. But of course Son right up there with the kind of positioning that you would want him to have. Let's have a little look at the main man then. So of course, Harry Kane, you'll have seen this slide before when we did the premium video. If you haven't already watched it, go and have a check of that out. Kane had some ridiculous underlying stats last season. Obviously, we know that he was top for goals inside the box, top for goals outside the box, top for goals generally. So Golden Boot last time around. He was also top for assists with 14, level with Vardy and Bruno Fernandes. So again, it was his all-round game last time that was just phenomenal over the course of the 2021 season. Top for chances created also amongst forwards with 49. Top for big chances created amongst forwards with 14. Top for crosses of the regularly playing forwards with 41. Top for attempts of the forwards with 137. There's a bit of a theme going on here. Kane just pretty much top for everything, and at 12.5 million he is expensive, and he is definitely on the upside of those premium picks that you can have. But I believe that whether he is a Manchester City player, whether he is a Spurs player, or indeed whether he goes anywhere else in the Premier League this summer, this man is one of those picks that it is going to be incredibly difficult to leave out. Spurs are making some really good signings this summer, some good attacking names coming in, and also some good defensive names looking like they are on the way in as well. Now, of course, if that happens, the potential to add to Harry Kane's game is greater still, but we're yet to see exactly what's going to happen with him, and we have to kind of wait that one out. One of the other things I do want to talk about is Dele Alli. Now, last season, Dele Alli was quite well talked about during pre-season, and there was a lot of managers, myself included, who were talking about Dele Alli under Mourinho and how that relationship, and, he was calling him, are you Dele Alli? Are you Dele Alli's brother? And the kind of tough love that Mourinho was showing Dele Alli. And then we saw in game week 1 what Mourinho could do to a player, and it totally destroyed Dele Alli's season. But the underlying stats aren't that bad, particularly when you consider the amount of minutes that Ali had over the course of the season. He was significantly down on a lot of these other players that were playing a lot more minutes and more regularly starting. So when we have a look at XGI, we can see Dele Alli sitting in there under names that we wouldn't necessarily expect him to be above, given the total number of minutes that he had last season. So his XGI numbers were looking okay last season, given the number of minutes that he had. His XG numbers were looking okay last season, given the number of minutes that he had. And I think when you've had so few minutes, your confidence is obviously going to be diminished. So when we're looking across that Spurs side, particularly for expected goals, we see Kane and Son obviously up the top, followed by Bale, who, as we've mentioned already, isn't going to be part of the team next season. And then it's Dele, third for XG amongst the Spurs players last season. And that is a Dele Alli very low on confidence, low on game time, and therefore low on match fitness. What we've seen so far from him over the course of the summer or since the season ended is we saw some more time for him under Ryan Mason at the back end of the season. We've then seen him take his summer actually not as a summer, not as a break, as a real drive to get fit and ready for the new season, and lots of really good preparation from him with kind of some summer training camps abroad. I think he was in Dubai over the most of it, and I think he was also in Abu Dhabi for parts of it. But nonetheless, working really hard. He's come back to Spurs, seems to have formed a good bond with Nuno Espirito Santo, who has talked about playing him as a striker in behind Harry Kane for the new season. So what we potentially got with Dele Alli, if we continue to see him play in the positions that Nuno has started playing him during in pre-season, is an out-of-position midfielder playing as a forward. Now, that is exactly the kind of thing that we want as FPL managers. Dele Alli is one that I am firmly keeping on my radar, because I genuinely do think that if he gets regular minutes this season at 6.5 million, he could be one of the budget signings of the season for us as FPL managers. The Spurs fixtures are a bit mixed, as we can see at the top of this Harry Kane graphic. So obviously start the season difficult with Manchester City, and looking likely that Harry Kane won't be available for that one anyway, given his extended summer holiday on the back of his Euros exploits. Wolves, Watford, Crystal Palace, they look great for investment. Then Chelsea and Arsenal equally look a bit iffy, but then they are London derbies and they are the sort of games that these players get up for, followed then by some nicer fixtures that follow. So I think that there is potential there to have a look at Dele Alli. But of course, we shouldn't rule out the defence. Nuno Espirito Santo is known for his decent defensive stats. Now, Højbjerg was third for passes last time around across the whole division with 2,765. Successful passes, he had 2,448, which was a phenomenal first season for him at Spurs. He was also third for tackles with 173 across the division. 98 of those he won, and they were successful. So underlying stats for Højbjerg look good. Now, what will be interesting for me is where we see Højbjerg playing for Spurs this season. Do we see him continuing in that kind of defensive-minded mode, or do we see him a bit more like we saw at the Euros, with a bit more of attacking threat and some set-piece assist potential? Now, when we do see him in the assist slides, he does appear in some of the assist opportunities. So we can see him there at the bottom of the bottom one for set-piece with 2 attempts from set-pieces. And we do see him pushing on, putting in crosses. So if that continues over the course of the new season, then we could see some good things from him. And obviously, as we can see there, he's top for interceptions across the Spurs team. He was also top for tackles won across the Spurs team. But the reason I'm showing you this is to look at Reguilón. Now, Reguilón, of course, had an opportunity to be bought back by Real Madrid this summer. They haven't taken advantage of that. Thank goodness, because that will make him a brilliant asset, not only for Spurs, but also for us as FPL managers. He was top for Spurs defenders for minutes per BPS last time around. He was also, as you can see here, second for interceptions with 32. He was third for tackles won last time around with 47. And he's also in there with final third touches, 522. His assist potential is definitely there, as is his goal threat. And if we see him playing as we're expecting as a wing-back or a full-back under Nuno, we will see him getting up the pitch. And that relationship with Heung-min Son will be a really important part of our game as FPL managers. Plus, with some more consistency of starters, and we're seeing Spurs linked with some really quality defenders in this pre-season, we could have a Spurs defender here who isn't cheap. He's going to cost you 5 million, but does have attacking threat and does have some real good promise there. One other one that I'm just going to quickly mention is Joe Rodon. Only managed 732 minutes last season, and that meant 8 starts for him, which wasn't a lot, but a lot of that was lost during the Ryan Mason era when he wasn't played as a result of the cup final, of course, because he was cup tied and wasn't able to play in that one. Got 2 clean sheets during his 8 starts. No real attacking threat from him. XG of 0.04, XA of 0.02. But he did have a goal attempt last time around. It was a header from a set piece. So if set pieces continue to be a thing and they continue to rack up some good set piece threat, then that could be an option. But his tackle 1 percentage was 93.3. So if we can see him get consistency of starts against a new bought in central defender, we could see some really good solid stats from him. And at 4.5 million, I think Rodon has potential to be a really nice cheap option, particularly when we get beyond game week 1. And I think having the opportunity to see who starts in game week 1 and what's happening over the course of pre-season, because he has come back early of his own choice because he wants to bed his way into that Spurs starting 11. Matt Doherty, just a quick word on him because there is a lot of rumour and a lot of chatter that he might get a move away from the club, which will be really interesting given that Nuno's just arrived. I'm not sure how I feel about that one, but let's see what happens with him. I think it's Region or Rodon at the back for me. That's it for us from a Spurs perspective. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please remember to hit that like button. If you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button. There are plenty more deep dives to come, as well as a lot of other videos between now and the start of the season. Leave me a note in the comments to let me know who you think are the best assets at Spurs and whether you are looking to invest in them for the coming season. Thanks, guys.